Hello?
Hello?
Is that better?
Yes and no.
You're not very helpful here.
Are you on edge right now? Is your phone on edge?
I'm not using my phone.
Is your phone anywhere near
Yes.
the microphone?
Let
Or
me
the-
toss it away. Okay, I tossed it across the room.
Okay. Because it was doing. It was like picking up something, and I know when it's on edge, that's when it happens.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was
Well,
it
if
on
it's
edge or not? I don't know.
no,
I'm
it's
asking
on,
you.
it's on Wi-Fi.
I don't know what to tell you then.
If the phone is 5 feet away from me, is that a safe? Is that the safe
I
zone?
don't hear it now.
Welcome to the podcast.
Are we starting? Have we started the show already? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know what I'm saying.
Because I need to spit my gum out if we've started.
What kind of gum?
I don't even remember. It's green, minty, fresh, something.
You don't remember. You just stick things in your mouth without looking at what it is.
I know it's gum. I don't remember the brand. Extra? Is that a brand? Maybe it's Extra.
I think that's a brand.
Let's go with Extra. But I don't consider this some sort of endorsement of this kind of gum, nor is this product placement or sponsorship. It's just
I
a
trust me,
brand I can remember.
I would never endorse any type of gum because I am a strict non-gum chewer.
I tell you what kind of gum I would endorse. There's only one brand of gum, and I don't think it exists, but there is only one brand of gum I would endorse.
Okay.
It is gum that was made by Peppy Foods.
Peppy Foods, yes. I agree with you. If Peppy Foods came out with a gum line, I would buy a pack every day. Every day, Peppy Foods.
Yeah, every day. I have no idea if they have a brand of gum or not, but if they don't, they should.
I don't even know if Peppy Foods is national. Doesn't matter. I would drive to Florida and buy Peppy Foods.
You wouldn't have to drive to Florida. You could just maybe mail order it. I wouldn't. There's probably a better way of getting it.
Maybe, but then I want to get to meet the Peppy Foods people.
Well, they have trucks. They should deliver them to you.
Oh, okay. So they would bypass UPS and FedEx and just drive to my house.
Right. They would drive from Florida all the way to Nebraska. I think.
I hand it to him, especially since like a pack is, I don't even know how much gum costs nowadays. I assume a pack's like what, 25 cents?
No, I mean more than that. I'm sure a pack is like
Okay, $1.
$1.20. Well, it means Peppy Foods. We're talking premium quality gum.
You're right. You're right. If it's anything like their coffee, where their coffee, a drop of their coffee will last you, what do we say, like 24 hours? Then one stick of gum should last you like a month.
Yeah, but in spite of that, you're going to buy a pack a day. So you're essentially saying to them
Yeah.
that you're going to buy 365 packs a year.
It's Peppy Food. It's essentially becoming Willy Wonka, where they're just creating these these incredible foods that there's no human being has even the right to drink it or chew it. It's amazing.
Exactly. I'm just trying to think of like if it's worth, because let's say it's $1.50 per pack of gum. So we're looking at it's $550-ish. I'm not good at math. For a year's worth of gum, is it worth it for them to drive 365 packs of gum to your house?
If they're getting endorsed on this podcast, then possibly, they want to keep their loyal customers intact.
Well,
I know. Okay, I'm sorry, but now all I'm thinking about is the Peppy River, where
Peppy River. What is a Peppy River?
Willy Wonka's factory.
Oh,
Yeah, and somebody sticks their head in and starts taking slurps of their coffee, and instead of getting sucked up, I think they would just die.
they would explode because
They would explode.
you can't drink more than one like a drop.
Or they become bronze statues. So they created like that monument out front that is in fact the people who have drank out of the river.
Well, it's like the witch's castle in Narnia, where it's like all the different statues of the people
Yes.
that the witch has turned into statues.
Okay, so are you saying Peppy is a witch?
I am not saying that. You're the one who
Oh
suggested
no,
that
no, I didn't.
drinking
I did
Peppy
not.
turns
I,
people into bronze statues.
I did not
You.
bring Narnia into the discussion. Okay, we're playing Narnia. Okay, so what are we doing here?
I think we're doing a podcast, and I feel as though maybe we've already begun. So perhaps we should tell anyone who's actually listening, which by this point I would assume, and I would almost hope it's no one.
I really hope.
It's us, because I think it'll just be you and me over and over again listening
Yes.
to the show.
If I-
Which, by
if
the
I-
way, by the
Go
way,
ahead.
your name is Aaron,
Yes, I'm Aaron Nix.
and my
And
name
your
is.
is-
Go ahead. You can.
No,
see-
your name is.
My name is Carlin Trammell,
Carl
and this is what we're calling the Pod James Pod podcast. So what I see this as being is an in-depth look at every last James Bond film that has ever been made.
Sorry, it's already funny.
So we're like 6-7 minutes in, and I feel like we've already gotten to the
Already halfway there.
we've already gotten to like the essence of the movie that we've covered for this episode.
Yeah. So with the podcast, Carlin and I, we've discussed we want to do hopefully one episode per month. So what do we have? 24 movies right now. So hopefully.
But that is not a promise. That is
Oh, yeah,
in no
that's
way
not
a
a
promise.
Oh no.
It's just a goal. It's just
So
like a.
you're guaranteed at least 2 years of this podcast, and maybe
Well-
2 years and 1 month if it lasts to the new movie.
That's
So
correct.
something to look forward to.
And you're not really
Well-
guaranteed that. I think you said guaranteed, but you're not really guaranteed
Okay,
that
okay,
because
you're right.
because we're only 8 minutes in. We might give up. We might stop. We might be like, I'm done talking to you, Aaron.
I might just get sick of James Bond. No, I mean that's less likely to happen than me just getting sick of you.
Well, I guess that's a possibility.
I mean that's fair, right? I mean James Bond's been around. We're obviously both fans. So
Well, I don't think it's obvious to anyone yet. I mean, just because we started
Okay.
a podcast about it doesn't mean it's obvious we're fans.
they know Jack Squat.
Yeah, we
Yeah. I mean, okay, so just to clarify, you and I are both, we're probably, we're heavily invested into James Bond culture. We've seen all the movies.
multiple times. I mean,
I
we've
don't
seen
know-
all the
yes.
movies multiple times.
I don't know if we call ourselves experts because, I haven't really, to be an expert. I've played the James Bond Seen It board game, and that's one hell of a game. That is a tough mother effing game.
I have never played that game. I wish
Yeah.
I had.
Okay, so I got it for Christmas one year from my family, just because my family they're James Bond fans. Grew up as a James Bond fan. They gave it to me for Christmas one year, thinking, "Oh, let's play this as a whole family."
Right.
We stick the DVD in. We start it.
Oh, you
we
clean
made,
house. You clean house.
No,
didn't
no,
you?
no, no, no. We, as a whole, as a family, we maybe got 10 out of 100 questions right.
Really?
I mean, granted, this was back in like '05 or '06, whenever those games were coming out, and it was the toughest game I've ever played. So
Can you remember a single question that they asked?
I'd have maybe for another episode I'll do a James Bond Seen It question and see if one of us can answer it.
That's a great idea. That, or maybe
that-
we can
that
make an
relates-
entire episode.
Oh, yeah.
Scene It questions. We can
Make it-
we can just steal their questions. They won't mind. The people at Scene It will love that.
We're endorsing them. So
Brought to you
Yeah.
by Peppy Foods and Scene It.
so no, I would not call myself an expert because to be an expert, I think you have to get at least 95% of all those questions right.
Do you think it's 95? Do you think that's the mark?
Isn't that the scientific way?
I don't know.
Oh, I don't.
I don't know what expert is.
Just throwing numbers out there. I'm just throwing numbers out
I mean, I would say you'd be all right with 90%. I don't think it has to be 95.
there. Okay, 90.
Yeah.
We'll go We'll go
That's an A on most grading scales.
90.
Yeah,
It always took me like a 94 to get an A.
it depended
In
on
high
your
school,
student or your teacher.
apparently you went to a really easy school.
I went to, yeah. Hey, do you want to talk about my school or do you want to talk about James Bond?
Let's talk about James Bond at your school because I have lots of experience with that.
James Bond was never at my school of 400 people in small town Illinois. James Bond never showed up there. In fact, I dare say, just to give you a little background, I mean, we can talk about this too, or we don't have to. But I am actually, in the grand scheme of my life, I've only been a James Bond fan for the back half of my life. I did not grow up a fan of these movies. I did not grow up as a young kid and into high school enjoying these movies. In fact, the first movie I ever saw was the movie that we're covering for this episode.
Are we getting to that now?
I was trying to transition. I was
No,
like,
it's
how
good.
can I do it? And I figured out a way. I did.
So you're saying that you have no nostalgic feelings
Nothing
about these movies?
before, like, because 95,
In
I think 95 was when Goldeneye came out, correct? 95, 96?
Correct. Yeah.
I
yeah.
don't remember. I didn't look,
90
I didn't
95
research it.
95 is the official
95.
date.
95.
I know that because I'll tell you later on the episode.
Okay. I can't wait. So
It's a
95.
it's a little teaser.
Ooh. Somebody was just getting ready to turn this episode off, and they're like, oh no, I'm staying on.
Oh, it's
95 was, I would have been in college at the time, university, as some people call it.
What are you? Did you go to did you go to school in England? University.
I have no idea who's listening to the show. I'm trying to reach everyone.
Well, we are talking about James Bond here,
Yeah.
English Enterprise. So okay, you went to university.
I went to university. So 95 I was in university. That's when I first watched a James Bond movie. I think I had seen a few minutes of Goldeneye or Goldfinger before that, but I caught it like near the end and I didn't know what was going on, and I could never. I think part of it too was like it was a little on the violent side, and like there was the sex and all that stuff. So when I was really young, I don't think my parents exposed me to it, and then I just never had any. I don't know. I think just part of it was like I didn't want to watch old movies.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So who did somebody inspire you to watch Goldeneye, or did you go see that with somebody?
no, I think it was one of those things where I felt like it was a hole in my collection of interests, and it had been so long since there had been a Bond movie, because I think the previous one was '89 with
Yeah.
License to Kill,
Yeah.
Dalton's second and last movie. The previous one had been so long that Goldeneye, when it was marketed, it was almost marketed as a jumping on point. Like this is Pierce Brosnan. This is a new Bond. It was almost like this was
revamping.
Yeah, this was the place to come in. And in fact, it was a new M. It's a Bond for a new post Cold War Bond.
Totally.
And so
Yes.
I looked at it as, you know what, if I'm gonna get in, this is a place to start. And so that's what I
Great
did.
place to start.
I jumped in and I started with Goldeneye, and that's what we're covering today.
Well, that is I think you did it the right way. If there's one movie to start with, especially if you started watching them when you got older, Goldeneye is a great place. And so to listeners,
The two of us, when we listen to this later.
I'm slightly younger than you by
About 20 years. You're about 20 years
25
younger.
years.
25
No.
years younger.
So enough of the age gap. So I
Because
grew
you're
up.
10. You're 10 right now, right?
Yes.
And
So
you have a great beard for a 10-year-old.
My parents got to stop giving me those pills. I grew up with James Bond. From as early as I can remember, 4 or 5 years old, in the late '80s, My parents were fans, but it was really I give all credit to my papa, my grandpa, my dad's dad, who was so obsessed with the movies. He had every movie on Laserdisc, and he was just a really big fan. So my clearest memory of first movie I watched. I know it wasn't the first movie I watched because I'd watch them with him all the time. My mom hated it because like you said, the sex and the violence. But my clearest memory is him sticking that huge pizza-sized laser disc into his mega-sized TV. And this is 1995, and it was incredibly huge for the time. And I and the opening, I don't know if it was a United Artists opening intro. It might have just been like the DVD, not DVD, like the Laserdisc intro, like "Welcome to Laserdisc." It was like a helicopter flying over buildings,
Yeah.
and like a helicopter like explosion, like, Laserdisc, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is gonna be amazing!" And right after that, Goldeneye was cemented in my mind, cemented as being like the greatest thing I've ever seen. And
So
shortly
you
after that,
first watched this on Laserdisc, just to clarify.
yes, I did
Okay.
not see this in theaters.
Okay.
And shortly after that, that's what inspired me. Of course, watching all the rest of the movies, I went as James Bond for Halloween, like 3 years in a row, like fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. And then for career day in middle school, career day, everyone's dressing up in Doctor Scrubs and fireman. I came as James Bond, and I had explained to every teacher that no, I'm not a waiter. I'm a secret. I'm a secret agent working for MI6. And they were.
So you're not really a great secret
definitely-
agent if you're having to explain it. Like, actually, when they thought you were a waiter, you were doing better as a secret agent.
Yeah, I should have just kept that going and like pulled out my gun. Trying to. So anyway, so we have two very different time periods of our lives that intersected with Goldeneye, and I like that. I like that we're doing this as our first movie.
Yeah. Well, so Goldeneye, I've rewatched it again here just recently in order for us to talk about it, and I assume you did as well. You were
Yeah.
supposed to. I don't know if you did. I'm assuming
I
you
watched
did.
it last night, and my wife was not a fan of me watching it last night. So I'm like, I have to watch this movie. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. Well, why do we have to watch it right now? Like, you don't understand. I have work tomorrow. There's no way I'm going to watch the movie before we
Right,
talk.
because you
So-
you would not watch a movie while you worked. That's not something you do. You're not that kind of guy.
Oh, little do the listeners know. They don't need to know that, Kron. Okay.
Well, I didn't say anything about it. So, anyways, Goldeneye. I watched it again, and I
Just to clarify, listener, I'm aware. I think we're both aware of some of our feelings about this movie. Like I'm aware of like your thoughts when you first watched it a long time ago. So I'm really interested to see how you approached it watching it 2 nights ago.
I think it's not a bad movie, but I also think it's not a great movie. And my problem with it, my overall problem with it, and I think there was no real way around it, is that they were trying to sell it too hard, or they're trying to lay the groundwork for explaining and resetting the stage for Bond, when they probably had to some extent. But there's a lot of dialogue that is very expository, where the Sean Bean character there's these little throwaway lines where he's saying things to Bond of like, does that silence the voices of the women you didn't save, and
I love that line. Sorry, it's so cheesy, but I love it.
And then the even at the beginning of the movie when he's doing the I would say almost nearly absurd car chase with Famke Janssen's character, and he's in the car with the therapist or the whatever she is, psychologist.
Money Penny?
No, not Moneypenny.
Oh, okay. Oh, the beginning car chase.
The beginning car chase. Did you? I thought you said you watched it.
No, I didn't. I was no, I was zoning out. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
The counselor, therapist, or whatever she was there to evaluate James. And there's like a couple of lines there, and then that gets brought up when he's talking to M, and it's like, you're a Cold War misogynistic dinosaur, and all these things that like they're having to say this is the way it was in order to set the stage for where they want to take it.
Yeah.
And some of that doesn't feel like it holds up now, because I don't know if they really went that direction with the franchise.
Well, they sure as heck didn't right after Goldeneye, that's for sure. Like the movies, in my opinion, took a steep dive after Goldeneye, or the Brosnan movies, at least.
Hey, we're not talking about those. We're not talking about those.
No, I'm not. But I agree that there was, with Goldeneye, they did have to set the stage again. They did have to almost relaunch Bond for a whole new audience, a whole new generation, because it had been 6 years. Like you said, the Cold War is over. This is the first post-Cold War movie. This is the first movie not based on Ian Fleming's works. This is, a new Bond. So every time there's a new Bond, I feel like, they have to do something like that to, create an identity with them. And I thought they did probably as good of a job as they could have done without totally rebooting the entire series. I think the stylistic choices they made were well done. I thought, Goldeneye is much darker. It's grittier right from the beginning. It's boom. It's action. It's in your face, and it's Bond movies are always very reflective of their times. That's what I love about the franchise. You can tell if a movie is made in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, or current based on how Bond is portrayed, based on how the action feels. And Goldeneye is very much an action movie. But yet it's very true to so many key Bond elements. It's just such classic Bond. With the casino and the gambling and the women and the villain and the Russians and everything. But yet it is revamped, and I liked the post Cold War story about it, because it's still in people's minds. It's still very fresh, and I think there was a lot of people wondering, is it really over? There's still a lot of questions out there. Can we really trust Russia? And I thought it was a very natural way to go about it.
And I think people are still asking that question today. Can we trust Russia?
Especially since they're questioning whether or not we give the president Super Bowl rings. But yeah, so I really appreciate that, and I always put myself, like, while watching a movie, how did that audience view it at the time? And because it's so easy right now to look back at it, and yes, Goldeneye is dated. Yes, every Bond movie's dated. 20 years from now, am I going to look at Skyfall? Well, Skyfall's not a good example because it's so old-fashioned, but like Die Another Day, it seemed ridiculous the year it came out. But 20 years from now, yeah, I'm going to think all those movies are very dated. But Goldeneye, I felt like, as far as technology and gadgets and all that stuff, was very smart the way they did it.
Yeah, I would say, and in some ways, Goldeneye doesn't feel all that dated. It's got a relatively classic plot going on, although there are some things I don't like about how they get there. In the beginning, like, there's a lot of happenstance and a lot of, like, Bond is just like, where is Bond at the beginning, where he just happens to run into Famke Janssen's character, and she just happens to be like, he just happens to run into her at the casino, and then he's like, there's a lot of things that was like, he just happens to stumble upon some of this stuff, and then it becomes the plot of the movie. That I thought was a little
I
rough.
agree.
But other than that, like,
it's not
it was
explained.
Yeah, other than that, it was like, well, it was a good classic thing of like there's especially, and it was a good post Cold War thing of like there's these factions in in Russia who are still wanting to use the technology and foster the Cold War, but turn it into like the whole idea of Alex Trevelyan's plot is, it's not even really about destroying, using it as a weapon, but like wiping things out, and then he's got like all this money. I think Bond calls him on it. It's like,
Revenge.
You're just revenge, but then you're just a thief. At the end of the day, you're just a bank robber.
Yeah, and I love that about Alex's character because so many Bond villains are it's always bigger, better. Every movie is trying to one up the past movie, and how many times can there be nuclear threats? How many times is the world going to be in danger? And we think that going to Goldeneye, but really these villains are so simplistic. These villains are so juvenile that all he really wants is a bunch of money and to get revenge for his parents' death. And it seems very fitting to his character. I like that about him.
Yeah. And I thought, because I had done a rewatch of all the Bond films back a few years ago, and when I first watched Goldeneye, the reveal of like Alex Trevelyan as 006 at the beginning, and he gets it's seemingly killed off, and then he shows up and he's actually still alive, and he's the villain. And so since I hadn't seen any Bond movies before, that it didn't come off as trite or anything that like one of his friends turned out to be a bad guy. But when I rewatched all the films in I think it was '08, I was surprised to see that's something that the Bond movies didn't really do that much actually. Yeah. That is something that like it took him about this is movie 17 or 16 or 17?
I think 17.
It took them 17 movies to really get to that. So I was actually, it's a kind of impressive thing that they waited that long before ever doing the your friend went bad plot.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's funny that you say that. I mean, maybe that's why I appreciate it. It seems so simple. Like, why wouldn't Bond ever interact with other agents more often? Even in MI6, you never really he's always perceived as the agent, the one and only agent, because obviously he's solving every world crisis. So it was interesting seeing what another agent who seemingly has just as big of an ego as Bond, how they would interact, and it was fun for a while. Going back and rewatching Goldeneye, I found so many links to Skyfall that I just wasn't expecting or I had forgotten about. As far as the other agents and another agent turning bad, and being really bitter toward MI6, making fun of M, bitter toward England, and not only that, but the whole idea of virtual terrorism and how M in Goldeneye says Bond is a relic of the Cold War, and that's such a huge theme in Skyfall. How does a person like James Bond fit in modern day?
So you're saying Goldeneye ripped Skyfall off? Is what you're saying?
No, exactly. No, I think it was just touching on that deeper subject of like the character of Bond, like what is his relevancy in this world? And Skyfall, I felt just honed that so much more and turned that whole theme into the movie. And in Goldeneye, I think that comes out with Boris and James Bond, whereas at the very end when Boris is recalibrating the satellite and Bond simply takes a metal bar and jams it into a gear and jams the satellite from getting back into a position. And it's so simple, but it's how somebody like him can beat technology.
Yeah.
And that leads up to so many of the Bond movies after Goldeneye. I think it was a good jumping off point.
Yeah, I think so. What any favorite scenes in the movie?
Oh, favorite scenes? So many. But the opening, I absolutely love this opening. It may be my favorite opening in all James Bond movies, just because there's no explanation, there's no context, there's no introduction of Bond, in a normal setting. It's him starting as he's running onto that dam, and that dam jump just goes on forever and ever. I love it. And then boom, right into the military base, and with 006, there's two agents, and the way he gets out, and the insane motorcycle jump into the plane.
That might be going too
I
far for me because like obviously
I
everything up until
love
that
that.
point, I'm like
I
I
love that.
love. I mean, I love that scene where he's like Urmov is like, don't shoot the canisters, and
Oh,
so
it's funny.
Bond's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I know how I'm gonna get over there, and he like just starts wheeling the canisters. He's like on the cart behind the cart, and that scene's hilarious. And then from that point on, it gets absurd where he's like trying to get on the plane and he's pulling the plane up just in time. And I mean, it's classic Bond, but to me that like harkens back to the Roger Moore, a little bit more zany,
Yeah.
hokey
It,
era, and not the like this could actually happen kind of
yeah, well,
realism.
it definitely straddles that line of like realism. Like, there are scenes where it's just super realistic and incredibly well shot, and then there are hokey things like that. And uh, that goes along with the tank chase scene,
Well, yeah, I was gonna bring
is
that up.
phenomenal,
Yeah, it's
which is phenomenal. So, is that your favorite scene?
I think so, and for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not a huge fan of this score, the score of this movie. It's got, I mean, it's very mid '90s synthesizer
Very
kind of sound,
industrial. It's very industrial.
and I guess it's all right, but it's not a Bond. It doesn't really feel very Bondian. It feels very video gamey, which maybe explains why the Nintendo 64 I don't know, maybe it has nothing to do with that, but like the Nintendo 64 game was very popular. And so I guess like later on they were realizing that music wasn't working for that scene, so they brought in another guy to kind of help compose it and give it the classic Bond feel with the brassiness. And so as they're doing the archive chase, and then he gets out and he does the tank chase scene, that's all that brings back in that very the big
Yeah,
brass and everything. So
yeah,
there's that, and then yeah, the fact that he's got a tank and he's just driving around town chasing after these guys, driving through buildings and driving under statues and rolling over cars. I love that, and I think that was as an initial viewer back in '95. I was like, I like this guy. This guy is doing whatever it takes to
yeah.
get things done, and that's what I like about Bond.
See, I think that scene works, and with especially with that music, because I think it was intentional because that scene is throwback Bond. That is when you watch that scene, that is straight up James Bond using whatever the hell he needs to get the bad guy. And I agree with you. I thought it was a perfect choice for that scene, and it works so well. And if the rest of the movie had that kind of music, the classic score, then that scene definitely wouldn't have stood out as much as it does.
Yeah, no, that actually
Um,
wasn't. I don't know if it was an intentional thing because there was an original track that still had that other sound.
okay.
So if you listen to the movie score, there is we can actually maybe put it in right here. There is a during the tank chase scene, there was a different original track, and they replaced it later on because it wasn't
Oh,
working.
gotcha, gotcha. Well, that's cool. That's a cool little tidbit that I didn't know.
So
And you
now
brought.
we learned something. We brought something to the table. People learned
You're
something.
welcome, listeners. You brought up the video game, and it's so hard to talk about Goldeneye without talking about the video game and its impact. And I told you, for listeners that were waiting to find out how I knew it was 1995, because I was thinking about Goldeneye, the video 007, the video game, and I was looking up some info on it just to see some stats of how popular it was and everything. It says it was 1997. I was like, oh, wow, that seems late. So I cannot believe it came out 2 years after Goldeneye, because in my mind, the video game and the movie are just they mold into each other,
Uh-huh.
because the video game is at the time is so expansive and so it was realistic and followed the plot almost uh, identically, and you playing as Bond that you just saw in this movie, that was just the coolest thing to me. and it really revolutionized first-person shooter games and multiplayer modes and everything. And that game was, it's one of Nintendo's most popular games ever. And I think that really cemented GoldenEye, for a whole new generation, for a whole new audience that may have never really been interested in Bond movies before. And that's why I think GoldenEye will always stick out when talking about Bond movies. Forever. I think GoldenEye will always stick out as being one of the most popular, one of the most well-received movies. Probably a lot to do with the video game, and I think that's really cool and really unique. For movies in general, that have such a popular game to go with it.
Yeah, and I think
So,
that game too had guest stars from other movies. I think
yes,
like Jaws and Odd Job and other characters
yeah,
might have been in it, like as little hidden
yeah,
skins or something like that. And
yeah. There's so many cheats and like the you only live twice mode, and you could have the golden gun,
that's right, yeah.
and lots of different things,
And
and it was really well done.
I
Yeah,
like those throwbacks in the game where it's and that's a whole other topic for discussion some other time. Maybe we
yeah,
do a whole show on this, but the idea that Pierce Brosnan's Bond is the same character as Dalton's Bond, is the same as Moore's Bond, is the same
yeah,
as Connery's. That to me is fascinating uh, because of the the age range of the big time range that exists.
hmm
But I think I like that because saying this, Goldeneye and Pierce Brosnan and this character is the same. It is
yeah.
all that history matters. We're not throwing it away. It exists, and that the game kind of did that.
Yeah, it was a great tribute, I thought, and that brings up an interesting point about Bond. About there's always this unspoken thing about when they switch actors. Does that mean the history of that actor's movies is with the character? Do we actually believe this character has lived through all these missions but stays young? How as an audience are we supposed to understand what this story, what the backstory, before it actually is? And they touch on that in GoldenEye several times. As you said with Alec, he always mentions, is this girl just another one of your girls? I forget the exact quote, but they talk about their missions before, and
Well, there have been
they
9 years that had passed
yeah,
between
yeah. So
Trevelyan
obviously,
dying and but like you're saying, like there had been a pre-existing history between Bond and Trevelyan.
exactly.
So yeah, there had
So
been
you
something.
can you can assume that Pierce Brosnan's Bond had been doing this for at least 10 years during Timothy Dalton's Bond movie. So it's really interesting
Well, for that
thinking
matter,
about them.
9 years before Goldeneye, he should have been Roger Moore running around with Alec Trevelyan.
You're right, because uh, when was Dalton's first movie?
It
Was
was
that
like
87?
87, 86, 87.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that would have been Roger Moore,
Roger Moore.
which kind of makes sense because I mean I love Pierce Brosnan as Bond. He may it's so hard for me to pick like a favorite, but I think Pierce Brosnan is great, and I think this is his best movie, and he's a great mix of Roger Moore's like suave and just being like a good ladies man, and having like that uh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Um, he's got some swag to him and some charm that I think Roger Moore brought to the table more so than being an action star.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas like Dalton and even Sean Connery is a better action star than Roger Moore was, and Bond definitely brings it to a new generation of action movies. It naturally the actor had to be capable of doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So he was a good mix. I love that about him.
Well, you did bring up the whole ladies thing, so I feel like we haven't really delved into this, and so I think we should before we wrap up.
There's female characters?
There were a couple of female characters.
Sorry, I just offended every female listener.
Well,
Oh,
well, neither you nor I are females, so I don't think you offended anybody.
all right. You're right.
First off, Judi Dench. I will talk about her again in future episodes because she is in
Yes.
six other Bond movies. But she does a great job here as she's got a great screen presence. She does a great job at being a character who can put Bond in his place. I think that's something that M always has to be able to do, and she does it wonderfully and sets the stage very nicely here. I like how they set up this whole, she's an accountant, or she runs numbers and she runs things like via stats and scenarios and things, and I don't feel like they ever really touched on that in the other the Brosnan movies again. But that aside,
Yeah, I thought. I mean, I love Judi Dench in all the movies, and I think she's the most memorable M, and she actually makes a character memorable. And her making M a woman was brilliant, and I think it really plays well with who James Bond is. And I thought it was definitely needed, in the '90s, have a strong female character in these stories rather than just a romantic interest.
Yeah, definitely.
And Judi Dench was, spot on casting.
Yeah.
And I love that she stuck with all the movies through all the years. Bravo to her.
Yeah, for sure. And then the more traditional Bond girls, you had Famke Janssen playing the bad Bond girl, because I guess the classic formula, there's usually two.
Xenia.
Yeah, usually two. One turns out to be bad, one turns out to be good, and so Famke Janssen's playing the Xenia on a top character.
Talk about another throwback. Good Lord.
Well, yeah, I think it really got away from the crazy names for a while, I think, and then they went back to it with her, and I don't think they've really done too many since her. But the whole
straight up with a twist.
the crazy names for the female characters, and she's real over the top, classic. She does a good job, and then Isabel Scoropo or something. I don't know how you.
Oh yeah, that's pretty good, I guess.
As
Natalia.
Natalia, yeah. She's fine. She's a fine.
She's
Bond
very
girl.
pretty, and most Bond girls are, and yeah, Natalia was a little forgettable. I felt like I was always a little annoyed with the romantic relationship in this movie, just because the rest of it is so well done. And most Bond romances are so forced anyway. That's the whole idea, is that he goes from girl to girl in every movie. But again, in this movie, it didn't really fail. That it felt a little forced, and most Bond girls are throwaway characters, I feel like, usually.
Yeah, most of the time. Yeah,
Most of the time.
That's how it is. Sorry,
Bond girls. But okay, so Bond cars, because I have thoughts on the Bond cars in this movie, or Bond tech.
Well,
Any
first,
thoughts?
yes, I love the look of the Z3, and it is a crime that thing never got to do anything but drive them to I can't remember, they drove maybe
Cuba.
two
Yeah.
feet in the car.
Yeah.
I actually have sitting on my desk a little die-cast Johnny Lightning of the
do you?
Z3 and the Aston Martin.
That's so
And-
funny.
And because the car is great, it's just a great looking car, but it never does anything.
That's so funny because, okay, when the movie came out and I saw the Z3, I saw the baby blue Z3, Goldeneye. It has since been, like, you asked me what my favorite car is. Like, if I could buy any car in the world, I would tell you BMW Z3 from Goldeneye, because I agree. I loved it. I just fell in love with the look of it. I thought it was so cool looking. And then even later on, like the Z4 or something, it just kept getting better and better. And it's so sad because I felt like it was just one big commercial. Q spends like 2 minutes showing all the gadgets on it, and then they showed the shot in Cuba when they're driving. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, what are they gonna do? I see an airplane coming. Oh, here something cool is gonna happen, and then the plane lands and they stop the car, and I'm like, what? Come on.
Yeah, I guess the whole product placement thing came late enough that they couldn't develop anything for it. But I'm like, How did you? I don't know.
It
How
was
did
sad. It
you?
was sad. At least we got a cool Aston Martin little car chase at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah.
But oh man, that Z3, it's a shame. That is my single biggest gripe with Goldeneye is not having, setting up the Z3 and then not using it at all.
Yeah, well, and then because then I thought, all right, well, they're setting it up in Goldeneye, they'll use it in the next one, and then it doesn't even show up, and so that's my single biggest gripe with that movie. But we're not talking about that movie yet.
We aren't even naming names. That movie. Oh, that's funny.
All right, well, Goldeneye is what we talked about in this episode, and I don't really want to get into the whole ranking thing because I feel like it's hard, and every day, you could feel like it's a different. You could rank things differently.
I agree, and especially since we're going out of order.
Yes, we are going out of order, but I do want to ask. I think that, at least from my standpoint, when I rank these things, I can say there's probably three groups. There's the group in the top. These are these, I think these third of the movies are the best. These third are in the middle, and these third are in the bottom.
Yeah.
Which third, where would you kind of place it?
Oh, the top.
The top.
It's if we're talking thirds, Goldeneye is definitely top. And I'm not going to give it a number or anything, especially since I'm revisiting these movies. I don't want to have that preset number or anything, but it'll always be in my top. Just because of the nostalgia aspect, and I really do love the jumping off point, and I love Brosnan, and I think it'll always stick in my mind there at the top.
I'm gonna say middle. I'm gonna say middle for me.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe it's a high middle, but I just think there are other ones that wind up beating it out.
Fair enough.
So
fair enough. No, that's good. I'm glad. I like that we don't agree on everything.
Yeah, I know. We agreed on a lot of stuff on this episode, and I'm a little disappointed, I gotta tell you. I was a little disappointed we agreed on the BW Z3. I kind of want to throw this car away now.
Don't throw it away. Don't throw it away. Send it to me at least.
No, I'm going to throw it away. I'm going to throw it away just to spite you.
That makes me want to go down to my basement and pull out my Aston Martin Hot Wheels car that I've had since I was a kid.
Yeah, I have an Aston Martin here. They're sitting next to each other.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
I think that.
All right, well, next episode, if there is a next episode, we are going to cover a different James Bond movie. And as you already alluded to, we're doing these out of order. Aaron,
Yes.
What's the next movie we're covering?
Live and Let Die. Live and Let Die.
Bum, bum.
So we're going back in time. So you can expect us to kind of bounce around these movies, give some variation so we don't just get swamped with all older movies. And I think it'll give us some good perspective as we bounce around. What works, what doesn't work, how are these movies all kind of related. I think it'll be fun, or at least it'll be fun for us. And I haven't seen Live or Let Die in a very long time, so I'm excited.
I am not excited.
Ah,
But that is for another episode. Okay, well, Aaron, it was good talk, and we'll talk about Live and Let Die next time.
sounds good.
All right. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later.